good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Malaysia seems to be stuck in our fight against corruption as the country ranked 57th on the Transparency International's latest Corruption Perceptions Index. It's the same spot we were at last year. Now, with all the anti-corruption promises coming from the Madani Government, why is nothing shifting? Joining me on the show to help unpack the numbers and the narrative is Dr Muhammad Mohan, who is President of Transparency International Malaysia. Dr. Mohan, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Before we unpack Malaysia's latest ranking, I do want to ask if you could clarify the metric itself. So when we talk about Corruption Perceptions Index, whose perceptions are we measuring and what are they measured for?
All right, thank you very much. The Corruption Perception Index actually has been published since 1995. Of course, the methodology has changed over the years. Now, first of all, the Corruption Perception Index is actually measuring the corruption in the public sector, not in the private sector. Now, who are the respondents? The respondents are individuals or business people or country experts. So, this Transparency International, they pick up the data from secondary data. So, it's very important to clarify here, TI themselves do not do the survey themselves. They actually pick this data from other sources. For example, the World Bank's report, the World Economic Forum's report, or the Economic Intelligence Unit report, and things like that. So, there are 13 different sources or surveys that is being done, and normally it's done over 2 years because some of these surveys are not done yearly. For example, if 2024, it could be 23 and 24's results, you know. So, sometimes you will find the CPI's results are lagging in a sense that, like for example, in 2018, when the new Pakatan Harapan government came to power, they charged a lot of high-profile people in court. So, in 2018 results, it didn't show, but it showed in 2019 results, you know, where our CPI score went up.
Realistically speaking, 2024's rankings would be reflective of which year?
I think 23 and partially 24, partially, okay. So, in 2024, as we all know, the results were the same as the 2023 results, stagnant. So, I believe that some of the efforts that the government has done has not really kicked in yet. But at the same time, the government need to be careful that some of the institutional reforms, the legal reforms that we have been advocating for so long has not been carried out. You know, so this is one of the things that they need to take care.
Okay, I just want to focus on the fact that there is a bit of a time lag. So like you say, some reforms may not have been captured yet by the latest rankings. But Dr. Mohan, there are critics who argue that the ranking doesn't truly reflect the state of corruption in the country because it's about perceptions more than reality. Why is it important to capture the perception of corruption from the 13 sources that you mentioned and not say the number of cases that are brought to enforcement agencies, brought to MACC or successfully prosecuted?
Okay. The Corruption Perception Index, we must understand that it is an indicator because we are picking this information from secondary data, and this is not like a primary kind of research where the sample size is very big and so on. We are not talking about 2,000 samples or 3,000 samples. Here we are talking about each of the survey maybe only about 90 people or 100 people. It's an opinion survey. So, for example, if you give the survey, for example, one of the survey is called World Justice Project. And if you really look at who are the respondents, most of them are law firms. So, many of the law firms in Malaysia are involved in this. Now, how will these people react? Because they are business people, experts, these are knowledgeable people. They know what is going on. So, for example, if you have a high amount of DNAA cases, discharge not amounting to acquittal. Worse is when the court has said that there is a prima facie case and calling him the accused for defence, and then midway the case is withdrawn by the Attorney General's office. Now, what is the perception? Perception is whether right or wrong, is there is political interference. So this is where the perception comes in. So obviously you don't expect the respondents, who are business people, who are lawyers and so on, to give you a favorable mark. They will say that, hey, something is not right. How come there is such kind of interference? So it is an indicator that where we go and so on. Now, to give you, strengthen my argument is, in some of the surveys, the question is very simple being asked to business people. Does bribery exist or not? You score between 1 to 6. If you score 1 to 2 or 2.5, it is existing. If it doesn't exist at all, he will score 6. When I just verbally, when I talk to many business friends that I have in a coffee shop or in a meeting like this, when we ask them, 99.9% will say 1 or 2, 1 or 2. Which means it gives you an idea that generally business people in this country, they feel that corruption is still a very big problem. You know, so even though it's perception, but perception can be, reality could be even worse than perception.
Well, perception sometimes inform our decisions, right?
Sure.
Can I ask you whether the stagnation at the 57th spot, do you think that is from a lack of progress, or is it that the improvements are being cancelled out by all these new scandals, the discounts and the DNAs? What do you think?
Well, I think it is the second part where you said cancelling off. Okay. In other words, you try to make progress, but then you are pulled down by other issues. Now, to be fair to the government, it's not that they never did anything since they came to power. In 2023, for example, the Public Finance and Fiscal Responsibility Act was tabled and passed in Parliament. What does this act mean? This act means now you can control the finance minister. He cannot simply borrow money as he likes. He has to get approval from Parliament. The debt to GDP is also capped at 60%, and also the other fiscal deficit and so on. So this is already there. The other thing they have done was the amendment to the Audit Act in 1957. This empowers the Auditor General now to get into, as long as there is money trail, even like an NGO like us, if we had received money from the government for any projects or what, the auditor can come in and Auditor General's office can come and audit us, including GLCs. That is one. Then the other thing that they have done, which is still new, just this year they have started for the civil servants, called DEEP, Demerit Evaluation, Performance Evaluation System. They call it DEEP. What it means is every civil servant will start with a score of 100, and if his deliverables are not there, the project is delayed, not executed, not tendered, his marks will start dropping. If he catches up, then he starts going up and so on. They claim they can do it every monthly, unlike the typical appraisal which is done once a year. Yes. They say that. So it's yet to see. So these are some of the positive things the government has done. But you're right in a sense that while you're doing all these things, and which is also concerning us because we make a lot of effort to get this score for Malaysia up, and then suddenly you have a DNAA cases, and not one, we had a string of cases like that, you know. And that gives a bit of a negative momentum.
Do the negative headlines do more to deter the ranking or the perception of corruption in the country than all these positive reforms? Much like misinformation, we were much more likely to be led by wrong information than we are by the fact-checked truth.
Yeah, I would say that depending on how high profile is the case, you know,
the higher the profile, the more the impact.
And you can conclude in 2019 when our score went up, when you can charge the highest executive in the country, the Prime Minister himself can be charged, and the Deputy Prime Minister also can be charged, or the Chief Ministers can be charged, then it paints a new narrative for the country. It means that, you know, the Malaysia is shifting. So that was the very positive thing happened in 2019. But then when we saw the PH government at that time collapsing, and then the scenario changed.
Dr. Mohan, when was the last time our score went up?
2019.
2019. So since 2019...
It has been on the downtrend. Until 2023, it rebounded to 50 points from 47.
Okay.
Okay. So that was a jump. But again, as I said, the data is a lagging data. And one of the likely reason why in 2023 the figure moved up to 50 was because of what happened in 2022. Don't forget that 2022 the federal court convicted the former Prime Minister.
Yes.
So that again gave a new momentum
boost,
and so on. You know, so all this, of course, those are like what we call quick wins. You know?
So I understand Malaysia wants to achieve the 25th spot in the CPI by 2033. So let's say 10 years from now, and that would mean a 2-point improvement every year, taking into account the time lag that you spoke about. Is this a realistic target based on our current trajectory?
Well, I think this is a question asked by everyone, including those who are entrusted to implement this.
MACC?
Including all, MACC and the government, and even within my circles in the civil society group are also questioning how did this number top 25 came about and so on.
How did it come about?
There are different stories today. Some say in the RMK 12 the Ministry of Economy proposed this, some said the Prime Minister was advised by someone and so on. But I always have to motivate people. You know, leaders give us a vision. We have to execute it. So if I use the analogy of President Kennedy, in 1963 he said, America will put a man on the moon at the end of this decade and bring him back safely to Earth. Now in 63 Kennedy was assassinated, he was not there, but in 1969 America actually landed on the moon and came back safely to Earth, you know, and so on. So such kind of dreams, sometimes you may think they're impossible, but you got to work towards that.
Good to aim high.
Aim high.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what it would take to consistently deliver a 2-point improvement every year. You talked about how much we jumped from in 2022, and then we rebounded 23. So when we think about those trajectories and how big high-profile cases can impact our ranking, what reforms, what actions would be needed to deliver this consistent improvement?
Okay, of course, this will require a series of changes and reforms happening. Leaving the high-profile cases aside, of course, if there is a case, MACC or the Attorney General's Chambers, they have to do their job. And we will not interfere, we'll leave them to decide on the merit of the case and charge accordingly. Even if they are from the coalition government, so be it. Okay, that is one. But the other things that you do, you need a slew of reforms to happen, because corruption just doesn't happen by itself. You know, there are a lot of enablers around it. For example, within the public sector, if the efficiency and the bureaucracy is still very very inefficient and hell of a lot of bureaucracy, then you find that this will open the door for corruption. Because business people are businessmen, for them time is money. So when you get a contract or a job and you want to execute it, you can't execute it immediately. You need approvals from the various agencies and government authorities or even the local council. And when there is a lot of roadblocks or bottlenecks, then what happens? They will look for a shortcut. And this is where it starts, you know, how much you want. And always there is a receiver and there is a giver, you know. So this is where the government should accelerate the digitalization, the process of digitalization as soon as possible, or accelerate it. And to give you an example, like in Singapore, today if you want to go to Singapore, you just download an app in your phone. 3 days before you travel, you just fill a very simple question, passport number, name and things like that. And you are given a QR code. You land at Changi Airport, you just scan your QR code, the gate opens. You don't even meet any officers. So you cut off the human contact. So I think Malaysia is going towards that direction, whereby it's going to be digitalized in many angles. So these are the few things that you need to do, and efficiencies in the government and so on.
Okay.
Now the other good thing which I need to do, there is going to be an act. I was told that performance for the civil servants, performance acts in Malay, I think it's called Akta Iltizam. You know, so this act actually will, I was told that possibly this year it will go through. So if that goes through, then I think it will be also good. I don't know the details of that, you know. So these are some of the slew of reforms, but it has to be collective.
Right.
I don't think the MACC alone can do this job.
Well, you have long spoken about the need for reforming the Whistleblower Protection Act, the Freedom for Information Act, the Parliamentary Services Act, all of those. I would consider we've long waited for amendments or reform to happen, and I hope that we're on the cusp of getting these reforms.
Well, the lowest hanging fruit to me is the Whistleblowing Protection Act amendment. It's not a new act. We already have an act, but the act has flaws and things like that. And we were involved since 2019. Now it's already 6 years.
Wow.
And lately there was a podcast between myself and someone from the law division and the Minister of Law and Reform, Dato Sri Azalina Osman. And she raised this question, why is it so important for you all to push for this? And I took the opportunity to explain where are the amendments to be done. So the info given so far, but fingers crossed, it will be tabled in this sitting, which is March. So we hope the one hurdle is passed. And then the freedom of information, we were told that in July they will be able to table it. And then the third one, the Parliamentary Services Act and maybe this Iltizam Act and so on. So probably about 3 or 4 acts could be pushed through for 2025.
Can I zoom in on the Whistleblower Protection Act? You said that you have made some recommendations, 6 recommendations or so. We know the most controversial part of the Act is the fact that whistleblowers forfeit their protections if they go to the media first.
Yes.
We don't know whether that's going to be included, but can I ask you what specific amendments would you, first of all, not just like to see in the amendments, but which provision would you be most disappointed to see left out?
Okay. In the Whistleblower Protection Act, Section 6, Proviso 6, to us is the most important. Now, what does it say? It says that if you go to the enforcement agencies, you will be given protection. However, if you violate other laws, we will such protection will be withdrawn.
Like OSA,
OSA and
Penal
Code 203A, I think, and so on. So, to us, this makes a mockery of the whole spirit of the Whistleblower Protection Act. You know, the whistleblower protection is meant for you to report for wrongdoing, and you are not reporting here to the media or anyone else. I'll explain why we feel that it shouldn't go to the media because of this factor. Because the moment you go to the media, the problem is when the investigation commences later, then you will have difficulty because some of these evidences may not be there, you know, could have been destroyed and things like that. So there are 2 schools of thought to this, because if you look from that angle, from an investigation perspective, it's better to go to the enforcement agencies. Okay, that's one. But if you go to the media, like for example, the 1MDB case actually only came up in a very big way through the media.
Yes.
The Pandora Papers from the media, Panama Papers from the media, you know. So there's another school of thought. But very interesting when the Law and Reform Minister 2 weeks ago, when she spoke about this in Parliament, she did mention about something very interesting. She said that there is another in the US under the False Claim and Dodd-Frank Act. They have a provision where if you report to the enforcement agencies and nothing is done within 90 days, you can go to the media and report, and yet you will get protection.
There is a expiry date.
Expiry date.
Okay.
Only thing is, I don't think in this tabling of if they can table it in March, this may not be included because we never had a discussion about this in the past. So we also don't want to go push for that now, because if you push, we already waited for 6 years, and just because of this one, it will stall the whole process. So phase 1, we let it go first, do all the major amendment, especially Section 6 that I was talking about just now, so that the Whistleblower Protection Act supersedes other acts.
You said that it's not in the spirit of whistleblowing protection, the whistleblower protection. Why did you say that? What does it mean?
Okay, the reason is, you see, when a person, by the way, I myself have been a whistleblower before. I reported to MACC, or those days it's called Bureau, BPR, you know, Bureau Penyegaran Rasuah. Okay,
yes.
So, and I became a witness for them for 10 years. 10 years I was following the case, going to court and coming back and so on. So because of that, I strongly believe, and mind you, at that time in 2001, there was no Whistleblower Protection Act. So when you go to court, the accused knows who is the person who actually reported him. See?
There's no, your identity is
I have to
revealed?
identify. The judge will ask you, or the prosecution will ask you, can you identify the accused, please? And you got to turn and face him and say, he is the one. See? So I did that, but similar to that, I don't expect others to be like me. So they should be given protection, because sometimes they face a lot of risk. The family will face a lot of risk. And if it is sometimes in the company, they could face retaliation, they could be fired, they could be transferred, they could be demoted and things like that. So that is the reason why when you blow a whistle for wrongdoing, of course subject to investigation and so on, then he or she must be given full protection, so that other acts don't come in. In our case, because the Official Secrets Acts and the Penal Code, what will happen if it is a civil servant, they will go after him, saying that he revealed the government secrets,
right,
and they will charge him on that.
Yeah, and I understand the fine is $1 million also.
I believe so.
Can be,
yes. So, or it could be jail terms, and so on. So that is the reason why Section 6 is very important. If they don't do that, then it defeats the purpose of the entire things and so on.
Well, hopefully we will be seeing that amendment, that provision included in the amendment. I do want to ask you in terms of public perception. So we talked a little bit about the kind of business people and country experts and the law firms, but when you bring it down to the grassroots, to the public, how would you assess how Malaysians feel about our anti-corruption efforts? Are most Malaysians apathetic? Are they disillusioned? How would you characterize or describe it?
Okay, we don't have any latest statistics, but I will bring back the 2020 statistics. Okay, so it's 4 years ago. I don't think the figure would have changed very much. That one, TI has another survey, which we call Global Corruption Barometer. Now, this is a primary research, meaning that every country, they may take about 1,000 sample. So it's done by tele-interview, meaning the research company will take a phone and call someone in Perlis, Kedah, up to Johor Bahru, Kuching to KK, and then they will ask a few questions and find. Now, to summarize, in that survey in 2020, 71% of Malaysians say that corruption in the government is a big problem. All right, and another question was, which are of all the institutions, that means the judiciary, the parliamentarians and politicians, the police, teachers and so on, among this group, which is the most highly corrupt institution? And politicians came as number one. All right, and so on. So that was a survey in 2020, and I don't think it has changed very much over the 4 years. So back to your question, what would be the response from Malaysians today? My feeling is that figure wouldn't have changed. I think 70% of Malaysians will feel that corruption is still a very big problem.
Can I ask what TI Malaysia's engagement has been with the group perceived to be the most corrupt, with politicians? How do you engage politicians to address this perception that Malaysians have about them?
Okay, interestingly, in 2020, when the report came, we made a press statement, and next day, the PAC chairman made a statement that we are appalled by these results, and we are going to call Transparency International to explain.
Okay.
All right. So I knew that I was going to get a phone call very soon, and true enough, I think in about 3-4 days, I got a call. They wanted me to make several copies of the report. At the same time, go to Parliament, meet the PAC committee, and explain to them how these figures came about. And during that discussion, without naming which party they come from, some of them were shocked and were not happy with the findings. I explained to them, this is not my finding, this is from an appointed, and we do this globally, not for one country. So this is the finding, this is actual data that is actually being shown. And then after a few minutes, he disappeared from the room. He was not there, But some other politicians who were in the room in the PAC committee, they accepted it. They felt that it's fair, to comment. So I think Generally, politicians know these things, but that is what the people feel about. And this is actual primary research, so actual feedback from the public.
Hopefully it triggers some self-reflection. In the minute or so that we have left, I do have to ask you if we could implement one reform, just one, immediately, so that next year Malaysia breaks out of its CPI stagnation.
I think the immediate impact, leaving the high-profile cases aside, the immediate impact is government's delivery system. That is what people immediately will feel. For example, you go and apply for something for let's say passport or any application, like passport has improved, but there's still something immigration can think about. Why is it that despite passport you get for within an hour, but you have to queue up at 5 o'clock in front of the immigration office? So why don't you fix that problem? There's no need to queue. You just come and do your passport and you go off. So I think the government's delivery system, if I think that one they can improve, I think the impact will be immediate. And cut off all the bureaucracy and make it very efficient like what's happening in Singapore. I think that will have an immediate impact.
Dr. Mohan, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.